Take a moment to find your seat. Take a moment to have some care about how you're setting up your supports. And allow yourself to settle in. And begin to settle in with some compassion for your physical body. Maybe some loving kindness for your energy body. Some equanimity for the mind. And some joy for your wise self. Allow yourself to settle. Allow yourself to ground. And if you're still finding your seat, that's just fine. Take your time. And as you begin to slow down from maybe the events of the day and come to this seat and this stillness, just take a moment to notice what's happening in the body as we take this pause. Without any need to change anything, just noticing how the body's showing up in this moment. If at any time you decide, oh, a little extra blanket would feel nice here, or a little extra cushion would feel nice here, go ahead and make that little adjustment here now, especially if that allows for a little more opening of the heart. As you settle and ground into your seat and start to become more aware of how your body is embracing the seat and the stillness, and maybe having a little bit of surrender to gravity, just bring the awareness to the heart center. Bring your awareness to the breath as well. And just notice the expansion and contraction. Noticing the breath cycle. And as you begin to ground and settle, choose a discerning placement for your hands. Choose an auspicious placement for your eyes, perhaps closing or maybe allowing the eyes to be at half mast. Still having a gentle awareness of your environment without having to necessarily explore that environment, but just feel grounded there. Inviting that sense of grounding. Gently scan the body in any way that seems natural to you. Perhaps that's inside out or outside in, from the top down or from the bottom up. And as you gently scan the body, I invite you to use the breath to bring a sense of ease. Use the breath to invite a sense of compassion. As you gently scan the body, use the breath to invite a sense of equanimity. And use the breath to invite a sense of joy. Moment to acknowledge and accept that equanimity, the loving kindness, compassion, and joy. Perhaps noticing the cycles of the breath, noticing the inhale, noticing the pause after the inhale, noticing the exhale, and the pause at the end of the exhale. Noticing how the breath cycle invites a sense of acceptance and a sense of sending something out as well. Take a moment to breathe in that equanimity, the loving kindness, the compassion, the joy. Beginning to cultivate this mature emotion, cultivating this compassion for the self, which is the source of the compassion and the loving kindness that we carry with us into the world as we engage in our relationships, in our community. In another cycle, in another exchange. And as you continue to stay aware with the breath, perhaps invite a sense of spaciousness into your experience. Maybe inviting a new sense of spaciousness that opens up some room for some of those senses of loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and joy. And if there's ever a distraction that takes the mind away, just come back to noticing the inhale, the pause, the exhale, the pause, and the spaciousness. And staying with that theme of compassion and loving kindness and breathing into that space and just knowing that this biofeedback mechanism is always available to you anytime. And taking our last few cycles of breath in this open-hearted position, I invite you to perhaps maybe just take your hands to the heart if that feels auspicious to you for these last few breath cycles, and just notice that physical expansion, the energetic expansion. Invite the mind to ground on that experience. And especially if you have set up some props and given yourself this open heart position, begin to plot your way out of this posture very mindfully and resist any distraction that would abandon this sense of awareness of breath and space and compassion and open-heartedness. Begin to make your way to a comfortable seated position just for a moment. And once you've found your comfortable seated position, I invite you to take your hands to heart center. Perhaps close your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. And consider an intention for our time together. Maybe leaving a little space for an intention if nothing comes up at this time. With an inhale, breathe it in. And with an exhale, sending it out. I invite you to lower your hands and open your eyes if they were closed, and take a moment to find a tabletop position and consider perhaps a few blankets to soften the floor if that would feel nice for the knees. And from this tabletop position, begin to breathe through a few cat-cows and see if you can carry that open-heartedness into this posture. Allowing the heart to open as you inhale, allowing the back to round. Decide what is auspicious for the neck and the head in that tabletop undulation of the spine. And as you begin to move at your breath cycle, at your unique pace, continue to move with compassion. Continue to cultivate that loving kindness that opens the heart. And I invite you to extend the hands forward about one handprint, and perhaps begin a little bit of a lean forward and complement that with a little bit of an extension back through the hips. So you could possibly continue the undulation of the spine, waving, moving forward like a wave. You could possibly add a little bit of a rotation, swinging the hips if that feels nice. But whatever you choose to do it in a loving and kind way, whether that be through the leverage of the arms or the slow pace of the movement, or really cultivating a guidance from the breath or maybe the wise self. And after you've balanced out anything that may feel like it needs balancing, if you've moved from one side to another, I invite you to extend the left leg back behind you and maybe wrap it around to the right. And you can always leave the knee down on this one. I can show this from the profile if that works a little bit better. And then I invite you to drop down to the left forearm and reach the right arm over to the left, taking a little bit more of a side bend in this tabletop position, making any little adjustments that feel loving and kind. You'll keep the legs the way that they are and just switch to a C curve where you'll bend through that left side, dropping the right forearm down and extending through the left hand. And then gently invite you to return to the tabletop position and consider mindfully setting that up on the other side, wrapping the right leg around. Consider placement of the right knee maybe. And then dropping down to the right forearm. You can always keep that right knee up if you want as well. And the left arm over to the right. Notice the breath. See if you can stay with a loving, kind pace in the breath. Gently transitioning to the other forearm and the other extended arm. And then returning back to tabletop. And if you feel like it feels nice to shake or wiggle anything out, maybe there's a little joy in some of those shakes. Stillness might be nice as well. We're going to do this one more time, wrapping the left leg into that shape once again. And this time, placing the foot in any way that feels auspicious to you, you'll lift the left arm up and just invite a little bit of rotation through this tabletop. So you're actively grounding through the right arm, grounding through the lower extremity as well, but maybe feeling this opening from the right shoulder through the collarbone, through the heart, and just let the left arm express itself however it feels auspicious, but let the heart be the center of this focus here. Just take a few breaths there, invite that loving kindness in, opening and lifting the heart. Gently come down, and we'll set that up on the other side. So you'll cross the other leg back around, grounding through the left arm this time, and then gently starting this opening. With that leg back behind, it might feel a little bit like a wild thing almost. Breathing into the heart center. Opening and lifting. Gently returning back. And allowing for any little wiggles and fidgets that feel nice there. Coming back to tabletop. Take a moment to place the hands beneath the shoulders, knees beneath the hips, and then just walk the hands half of a handprint forward. Flip the toes. Begin to press into the floor. Draw in through the core. Start to float the knees and reach the hips up and back, pushing into the floor. Eventually landing in a down dog. Allow for the footprint to change. Allow yourself to find a loving, kind down dog shape. See if you can still keep the heart open in this shape. If you feel comfortable, maybe even closing the eyes for a breath cycle or two. And staying in the heart, staying compassionate.
When you're ready, perhaps reaching the right leg up. That's just an option. You don't have to, but we're going to eventually bring the right leg to the front of the mat in any way that works for you. You could step it all the way there. You could take a couple of steps to get there. And then eventually bringing the left leg down, perhaps swinging this left arm up and around to come up into a warrior two shape. And once you find your warrior two lunge, allow your footprint to change so that you can feel really grounded and supported in your warrior two shape. Notice how it feels through the grounding of the lower appendicular, all the way up to the pelvic floor, to the strength of the core. And just for a moment, bring your hands to heart center. And once again, feel that expansion and contraction. And the next time you feel the heart open, invite the arms to open as well. And take a moment in this warrior to ground, stabilize, and expand with an open heart. And as you continue to find this stability and grounding in the legs, cultivating the loving kindness through the heart, begin to soften and find this peaceful warrior shape, reaching the right arm up. And maybe opening the heart a little bit. Perhaps the left arm falls down behind. This is one of these poses that always makes me think of that fierce compassion, this strong base, the equanimity of it, but also the peacefulness of this soft lift upward. Just grounding, stabilizing, expanding with compassion, and gently we'll transition the right arm down towards the right side. You can always take a block down inside the right leg here for a little more support if you would like. You can also go against the wall. Take a moment to come into this side angle shape, however it feels good in your body. Again, grounding, and maybe beginning to open the heart once again. Sometimes it feels nice to just continue to feel that biofeedback, the opening and closing through the heart center. If you'd like to extend the arm up, over, or even around, that might open the heart again, feeling that heart opening. At the end of your next breath cycle, begin to track your way back down out of this pose, taking the left hand down, followed by the right, lowering the left knee, or stepping all the way back to a down dog. So you could come back to a tabletop shape, a down dog shape, perhaps a child's pose, but whatever you choose, moving through this transition with mindfulness and compassion, and loving kindness. We'll begin to explore the other side. If you rose the right leg up on that side, maybe there's a lift of the left leg once again. And then making the way to the front of the mat with the left leg in any way that feels good for you, grounding through the back leg. You can have a little swing of the right arm to bring you back up and around. Something that can be a little bit playful. Ground through the lower extremities, find your stability and your center, and bring the hands to heart center. Once again, take a few moments of breath, feeling the opening of the heart. And on a breath cycle, expand the arms into that opening. Continuing to ground down, perhaps letting the right arm fall and the left arm rise up, and lifting the heart. just noticing once again this moment of fierce compassion. Maybe finding a little bit of joy in this move, grounding, stabilizing, extending. Gently placing the left forearm onto the left thigh, leaning forward over the left thigh, and then opening up the heart once again. So maybe it's just a matter of the right hand on the chest, the right shoulder moving back as you ground down, and then the arm can go straight up, could go forward, maybe it could even go around depending on the comfort and the shoulder. Be kind to the shoulder and still open the heart. Rooting and grounding into another breath cycle or two before gently placing the right hand down on the mat, followed by the left. And then consider the transition of your choice, both knees down to tabletop, child's pose, or down dog. Take a moment to notice how there might have been any shift that occurred in your practice, in your body, in your breath, maybe even in the mind. And just notice if there has been an increase in intensity, if you can still meet that practice with kindness and compassion. That's the mature emotion, right? Showing up with kindness and compassion, noticing if you want to continue in more intense positions, or if there's something a little more auspicious, if there's a way to hold that pose, hold the spaciousness in the breath, and also lift the heart. I invite you to come to a tabletop shape. And from the tabletop shape, begin to walk the hands forward, half a handprint, and lean the hips forward. And consider bending the elbows toward a chaturanga, toward a push-up, without needing to get all the way down. Notice how as you engage with that eccentric phase, it opens up the heart. So just play gently, incrementally with lowering down. Be really curious about how this eccentric phase creates an opening and a stretch. And then if you'd like to add a little bit of intensity, you could lift your knees. You could decide to lower down a little bit deeper, but do that sequence, do that exploration with love and kindness. And allow yourself to take any other complementary shapes along that exploration, just noticing what it feels like to lower down and press back. So hopefully you might be feeling a little sense of heat with that lowering and that upper appendicular, holding a little bit of body weight, leaning forward and opening the heart. And when you're ready, begin to lower all the way down. See if you can do that nice and slow. And find a position prone on the floor that feels comfortable for you. So maybe that means a blanket underneath the pelvis. For a moment, begin to find an auspicious footprint. So let your legs be any distance apart that feels good for you. And take the hands beneath the shoulders for a moment. And gently press the floor away and begin to open up the heart and find this gentle cobra shape. And notice if you can maintain that spaciousness in the breath while engaging in some of the intensity to hold up the open heart. And then when you're ready, gently coming down. So we're not holding this for any longer than necessary. You can always take a break and allow the head to come down to the top of the hands and breathe into the back. We're going to go through a couple of cycles. We have plenty of time to explore this. So please just let this happen at your pace. Don't feel any need to artificially accelerate this exploration at all. Let the lift, the elevation be enough. Let the duration be enough. Still meeting the challenge, but meeting it with compassion. Noting that opening the heart is the point of this. So we'll give you another like 5 to 10 breath cycles. We all have different cycles, so it's enough time to play. You could play with hovering the hands a little bit while you lift the heart if you want to play with that. And just notice what's happening at the spine. Allow for there to be enough space if you have a tendency to feel compressed in the spine, but also allow for that to be a backbend that's taking place. So the pubic bone is grounded, and perhaps notice if there's unnecessary tension in the glute and see if there's anything you can let go of there. If it's something that's really helping you avoid a sense of compression, that's fine too. Maybe the inner channel of the thighs can help feel auspicious there. When you're ready, lift up and come back to our tabletop shape. And from tabletop, allow this to be a little bit of a palate cleanser and shake anything out that feels like it could benefit from some shaking. And then step the right foot forward and just come into a Anjaneyasana for a moment. You can take blocks down to support you if that feels nice. But come into a nice rooted lunge shape. And once again, orient yourself in this vertical plumb line almost within a lunge, right? And begin to open the heart in this standing shape. Think about the very center of the tip of the crown of the head and extend upward. And if it feels inviting to you, perhaps even taking the hands behind the back. You don't have to clasp. Maybe it's thumbs, maybe it's interlacing the fingers, maybe it's just reaching back. And lift the heart and reach forward into a kneeling, humble warrior. And allow a small, subtle expression of this to be enough. If you really want to extend into a full lunge and fold further, that's available to you as well. But whatever you choose, continue to do it. Can you do it with loving kindness? Can you do it with compassion? There's a reach that can go on with the arms behind that facilitates that opening. There's a grounding to the legs that facilitates that support. There's a fierce compassion. And there's a spaciousness in the breath. When you're ready to come down, gently lower back to a tabletop shape. And once again, shake out anything that you need to. Maybe notice if there's any joy in that shake. And when you're ready, set up the other leg in front, knowing that one side will always be a little different from the others. Isn't that interesting? And as you begin to ground through the footprint, rise up and expand. Find spaciousness in the breath as you begin to explore the hand position. Just notice if you'll take a similar approach to the other side, or maybe it's a little bit different on this side. Allow that choice to be guided by compassion. Notice the spaciousness in the breath. And gently returning back to tabletop. From a tabletop position, you can shake anything out, and I invite you to locate one of your blankets, perhaps. Just have it close by. You don't need to have one, but it might feel nice to soften the floor where the knees are. And we'll grab 2 blocks because we'll play a little bit here. We'll take these blocks back by the ankles. And from this kneeling position, rise up out off of your shins into a extended kneeling shape. So most of your body is over the knees and your hips are no longer flexed. So just take a moment to feel that hip extension. Maybe there's a little bit of strength in the inner channel of the thighs and the pelvic floor as you root down through the legs. Bring your awareness back to the breath. And with that expansion, allow the heart to start to lift. Allow the sternum to begin to rise. And as you open your heart, there's a couple of different positions. You can invite the hands, perhaps behind the back to the low hips, to the low back above the hips. Maybe that's enough to just lift the heart and come into this camel shape. There might be some blocks close by. If you'd like to take your hands to the blocks and explore that continued elevation up that allows for the arch back. And just notice if you have any tendency for that compression to create space and create support, and stay engaged in the inner thighs and the legs, being very mindful, tracking your way to come up and back out of that shape. And then for a moment, just sit back down. Just see if you can come into this rock shape for just a moment or two. If you need to adjust or just take a tabletop, that's fine too. Maybe a block goes underneath the seat for a moment, but come back to this vertical plumb line in your chair, in your seat. We'll just have a chance to play with that one more time. So if you didn't try the blocks last time, or if you did, you might see if there's another configuration that works for you. And begin to settle in through the leg print and the shins. Consider what it takes to really hold the body up physically. What does it take to hold the energy through the breath? And really have that courage through compassion to lift the heart and continue the upward heart opening. Think of the heart opening more than the collapse down. This is where we really get the benefit of heart opening more than thinking of this as a backbend, right? You don't need to reach back. Keep going up, 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 and over. Root down to rise. Stay stable. Stay with the breath. And just maybe play with even a hand position of the heart if you're unsure of what to do. Just come back to that shape at the heart. Very mindfully making your way out of it slowly and returning back to your seat for a moment to just take a pause and feel the effect of that practice. Come back to the vertical orientation of the spine. Consider the very center of the tip of the crown of the head. And just extend upward, allowing the breath to feel that space, to provide that space. And we'll keep the blanket close by. Make your way to a tabletop shape one more time. So you might even want to have a second blanket or a bolster close by. And from that tabletop shape, allow for a very slow and auspicious undulation of the spine. And just like we played with at the beginning of practice, begin to slowly move the hands forward. Maybe come into a little bit of that chaturanga play, just even flirting with it from the knees with a little micro bend in the elbows. That once again allows for a little bit of an opening in the heart, but then also allows for a little bit of a return back towards the heels. So some of you might be going all the way back, and if that feels like a great auspicious range of motion, fantastic. If you feel warm enough for that, that's great. But only a little bit might be enough to provide something subtle to check in with, to just note the challenge and meet the challenge with compassion. That sense of mature emotion, emotional maturity. Tapping into a little deeper wisdom. After you've played with this to warm up the shoulders and everything a little bit more, begin to make your way back down into a prone position. And this time, perhaps considering, well, the blankets are just an option. So you might have a couple blankets underneath the pelvis, or you might just have them close by for when you decide, if you decide you'd like to have them there. Let's move the strap close by as well. So from this shape in this prone position, I invite you to come to the forearms if that feels auspicious. If it doesn't, then you can stay down and maybe plant one of the hands on the floor so that you have a place to rest the forehead. But I invite you to bend the left knee and perhaps taking your strap with a little loop in it. Or you can just grab the two ends of it and just play a little bit with this quadricep stretch in this kind of half frog shape. So there's always the sandal option. You have a loop in your strap, maybe coming through the big toe, coming around. And just think of an auspicious placement for the forearm to support the spine in this heart opener. If you want to reach back with the hand, you can always reach back with the hand. Once you've found your way to play with this position, come back to the breath. Breathe a little bit of love and compassion. And when you're ready, gently release that and make your way to the other side. Maybe playing with the loop and the sandal. The sandal is a loop around the leg, and then the end of the strap goes through the big toe and the second toe. And then maybe that's enough. Maybe after a few breaths, as we lean into the space, as we find that space, if there's more to be played with, just being curious, but also being discerning and being guided by that emotional maturity, the deep sense of wisdom. And after you've played on both sides, I just want to give a few options to play with one more heart opener. We can play a little bit with a bow pose. So it might be nice to have a couple blankets down on the floor. We've done this in the 10 series with a bolster. So if you liked that, you might play with that as well. I prefer just blanket. So I'm going to take a moment to find where that feels nice on the pelvis and just allow for that cushion to orient myself to the floor because it feels different than the floor. It feels very different to me. So if you want to play with both legs at the same time in the strap, you can be really playful with this and flex the legs and thread the strap around. And very kindly, compassion, maybe play with the reach back and perhaps a little bit of lift with the heart that is fueled by some of that experience that we had with the cobra and also the camel. You may notice that you might be able to reach back and the strap may just get in your way if that's the case. So take a moment to measure that playfulness and see what works best for you. Now, you could always just do one side at a time. One side might cause you to lean a little bit, so just allow for a balance so that if you're rotating and extending back, it's something that you're doing intentional, that you're pursuing that with a discerning intention. Now, once you connect with the back, with the legs, allow the legs to fuel a little bit of the lift in the heart. So you can use the strength of the legs to reach toward behind you and maybe open up the heart with that. And let that let that be a playful exploration. Notice if your breath goes away, right? So maybe noticing if you need to back off of that. Try to keep space in the breath. Allow for the heart to open. Maybe that just takes a little more time. Beautiful. Wow. Once you've had a little bit of time to play with this, take a little bit of a break, laying prone, or maybe it's just tabletop, and come back to the breath. Decide if there is one more play with heart opening. I'll give you one more option here, and that could be perhaps a locust pose. Locust pose will not be a bend in the knees. You may not need the blankets. As you lay prone, you could take a strap back, or you could have an interlace if that's available, and play with that opening and maybe extending the legs with the knees staying extended. So from that locust shape, consider if you can engage maybe even the inner channel of the thighs and reach the legs back behind you, staying strong in the center. And maybe that open-heartedness is fueled by a little bit of a contraction between the shoulder blades as you reach the arms back, opening the heart and continuing to find space in the breath. So beautiful. All right. When you're ready, come back to your prone shape and take a few breaths into the back. So we spent a lot of time opening the front body and focusing on how the heart expands in the front. Just notice the expansion in the back. Notice how the lungs expand all the way down towards the low ribs. If it feels nice to turn your head to one side, just take a few breath cycles and then move to the other side. Notice if you have a habit of always going to one side. Maybe it feels nice to be centered and plant the forehead down over a stacked handprint or forearms, allowing you a little bit of space for the nose and breath.
Maybe even allowing for the head to retract. And without feeling a need to rush at all, continuing to breathe in this moment, moving with loving kindness, just begin to think about perhaps gathering your bolster and 2 blocks to set up a supported child's pose. So essentially the same setup that we invited at the beginning of practice with 2 blocks, creating an incline in the bolster, and then inviting a wide knee print. And a little bit of space. Noticing if different body shapes, different bolsters have different heights. Notice if you can come to one side. Maybe there's a blanket that would feel good. Or maybe if you're Melody, you have a giant teddy bear you can use. One of the things I should have included in the prop list. Consider taking 5 to 10 breath cycles here. Noticing when would be an auspicious time to turn your head. If you have 2 blocks beneath you, you might be able to take your hands in between the blocks and actually hug the bolster. And when you're ready, you can begin to gently make your way out of this, seeing if you can continue to cultivate that sense of openness in the front, balancing it with an openness in the back, and slowly, gently making your way onto your back. Once you make your way onto your back, if there's any final poses that feel auspicious to you, like a happy baby, or just holding the knees and circling, take a moment to settle in to a supine position and eventually settle into your final resting pose. Notice if you'd like to have a blanket or anything else that makes this feel supported and cultivates a sense of compassion. And as you begin to settle and begin to ground the body, invite the breath to ground too. Just note that you met some of the challenges through this asana practice with an open heart. And it often takes a lot of effort. And if we acknowledge the effort that we've just exerted, with that wisdom, allow the body to find rest. Invite a relaxing breath cycle. And invite the mind to rest as well. And in this stillness and in this rest, just maybe one final moment noticing the reverberations of your practice, of this effort, of this open heart that you've cultivated through equanimity and compassion, and loving kindness and joy that you will take with you, that stays with you after the practice. And we'll finish with a silent call and response. I will say a line that you will just repeat to yourself silently. May I have peace. May I have health. May I have happiness. May I have peace. May I have health. May I have happiness. May I have peace. May I have health. May I have happiness. Now I invite you to call to mind our community. And taking a moment to send to them this sentiment. May you have peace. May you have health. May you have happiness. May you have peace. May you have health. May you have happiness. Taking one final moment to receive that offering that was extended to you by yourself and by your community. May you have peace. May you have health. May you have happiness. Share a moment of silence for the next 90 seconds, and my voice will break that silence at the end of the time. Gently bring awareness back to the breath. Just notice the subtle expansion and contraction. And begin to invite any subtle movements in the body as you begin to wake the body up. And begin to mindfully track your way to a seated position, moving as slowly as you need to, taking as much time as you need to in the next 30 seconds or so to slowly make your way to a seat. And as you settle into your seat, take a moment to extend up, stabilize from the center, and open the heart. If it feels auspicious to you, close the eyes, or maybe just take them at half mass and gently bring the hands to heart center one more time. I invite you to recall the intention you set at the beginning of class, or maybe notice if something new has aroused. And with an inhale, breathing that intention in. With an exhale, sharing it out with our community. I invite you to lower your hands and lift your gaze. And if you need to make your way to a seat, you can take the time to do that, but we'll take a few moments for a short debrief before ending our time together today. So I'll invite any questions or comments on how the heart opening experiential practice was for you.
I was in child pose most of the time because I feel the extension was okay. I don't feel pain when I'm doing it, but if I leave the pose and then I feel I couldn't go back to a comfortable position. So for modern people who sit all day long and you lost a little bit of curve, what's a good time to stay in that pose? Or
Yeah.
should we just do flossing and avoid extensions?
I think that's a good question that really is rooted in the experience of the person that you're referring to, right? So if extension causes pain, then I would definitely back off of that and only do a range of motion and a duration that feels like a helpful challenge, right? And I would encourage some of the active range of motion to precede anything that's passive, like a sphinx, or some of that prone positioning might be too much. So yeah, you mentioned flossing, you mentioned that tabletop position where we do at least have kind of a closed chain, some of the leverage, right? But maybe, some of the things we could have done to warm up that weren't in this program are just standing arm movements, right? Where you're really trying to find the active range of motion of heart opening. So how might you be even kind of miming a pulling kind of engagement? Sometimes you'll see the cactusing of the arms encouraged to warm up heart opening poses because they're an active range of motion, and having that complemented with tabletop is really nice, isn't it? Because you get your closed and open chain and you can maybe take one to the other. So that might be a nice way to play with that. I like that we also might invite some of that camel shape just standing, sometimes when you're on your knees, it's even more disorientating than if you were just standing and opening the heart, right? So another active range of motion invitation for some of that extension. Does that answer your question? Great question, Rachel.
I can share a little bit about this beautiful practice. First, thank you. And then for the overall concept, I think it blended really well with the posture and the intention you're setting as the loving kindness. I really like it, especially I think in most of the self-compassion practice and the meditation, like loving kindness would be the first step before we go into all the way to compassion part. So I really appreciate that you take this one as the first step, because I know sometimes I've we're introduced into beginners or someone that's not taking any step yet. It's hard for them to really involve in compassion right away. So maybe just bring their attention into this presentness, into loving kindness, a little bit sweetness into their life. I think this is a perfect practice for them. Yeah, thank you. And then oh, by the way, thanks for killing him. I was using him again, but yeah, a little bit off season is making me feeling super hot, but like yeah. Yeah, so yeah, just curious about since you call this like experimental practice, is there any focus that you're focusing on, like what part of this would be like experimental you want us to
Yeah, I'm sorry, did I say experiment? I'm experiential.
oh yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, I got it.
Yeah. The experience of the backbend didactics is what is intended here. And you'll find a lot of what we did in session 8 and 9 of the 10 series as well, and a lot of the slide deck and the backbend section of the content manual.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully after reading that and going through slides and maybe hearing those cues and getting a chance to feel them in your body was that was the intention of the practice today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure. I need to know where you get your teddy bear.
It's IKEA. I don't know, really, it's like a seasonal one. I don't know. You can check it out.
So I should have like teddy bear yoga at,
Yeah, I was literally thinking about that. Maybe some pre-recorded or in my social media channel in the future. I would. Yeah, thanks for that. That's really inspiring. I might start that from beginning to just in my mind for this past week.
Yeah. Any questions on the back bends? How do we feel about teaching back bends?
I feel like there's not, from what I recall of the didactic, there's not very many people who back bends, unlike forward folds, are very unsafe, except for like people with pregnancy or, you know, who might have like a disc that's herniated in the front. So I just wondered if you could, cue us into some anti-fragility language on how you can like lead a sequence like this if you have someone who maybe doesn't know or is just becoming aware of something like this.
Yeah. Well, I think Rachel mentioned, that she had some discomfort, or she is aware of people who might have some discomfort in some of these poses, especially if you're asking, if you're holding them for a long time, or if you're inviting them to be held for a long time without offering breaks, right? I think that's the anti-fragility component, is if you're offering a lot of options here, if you're offering an active range of motion, right? If you're not telling someone to grab something and leverage into it, right? Just like we do with twists, right? Like there's not a cue that says, get to your ankle and pull, right? And definitely, you know, and kick. Like it's all set up to allow for an invitation for that to take place, should it feel auspicious for someone. In terms of conditions, there could be a number, Julia. You can have there are a number of people that are actually prone to compression, that is different from slumping, or they could have both as well. You could have hypermobility, you could have a herniation in the back that is really bad for a back bend. So you could have scoliosis, you could have people with chronic back pain, maybe that they don't feel good in back bends, right? So you have to really think of like gently inviting the idea of extension, right? The other thing about back bends is that we're going to move in that direction. So outside of a yoga class, how many times do you move in that direction, right? Like we spend our whole life forward facing, forward reaching, forward everything, right? So just knowing that that's somewhat foreign, and trying to encourage more and more movement in that direction and take joy in that, become more aware of that, and extension as you expand, and extension upward as you extend backward as well, I think is really helpful. So those are things to proactively cue that can keep you out of fragility language, right?
I feel if you work in a commercial studio, due to liability issues, they're very strict about teaching extension. Like at Club Pilates at level 1, you are not allowed to teach extension, and it's always neutral spine. So for back bend, that kind of thing, they make you do on a bolster ball.
Yeah.
And if you look at the population who shouldn't be in this position in the Pilates curriculum, they have like a long list of things. So yeah.
I mean, in extension backward, like where is that extension taking place, right? We have a certain amount, and relative to what starting posture, right? So if I'm here, the only way for me to get there is through extension. So it's a relative thing to think about, right? If someone's flexed, then of course we're going to cue extension to come to neutral. So do you go from neutral to extension, and when is it appropriate to do that? I think that's a really important question to ask. All right, so
Maybe
yeah.
maybe take a class like at Core Power. I was looking at it, and every single class has like camel pose as their peak pose in the description for their, signature classes. And I was like, huh, I wonder about that one.
I mean, I think you could cue camel pose to really just kneel in a comfortable position and lift your heart.
Mm.
Allow that to be enough. Open your heart, lift your heart, and allow that to be enough. If you think the only way to do camel pose is to put your hands on your shins or calves, then I think that that's a very inaccessible way to cue that. But and so yeah, I think you could see camel on the sequence or on the lineup, and then have the experience unfold in a number of different ways, depending
So
on
like this could be camel for someone, you know.
Absolutely. This can be camel.
This
This
could be
can be camel. This can be camel. Right? Like it does not require this in order, right? Like there's so many of these poses that we are embodying the way that it feels good and auspicious in our body, that we can repeat, right? That we can come back to, that actually serves us. And we do this, right? Like we spend enough time here, and what do we naturally do, right? We're like, oh my God, I've been working so hard. Oh my God. Like we'll even use the back of our chair to do camel, right? Yeah.
big stretch.
Yeah.
Yawn.
Yeah, putting the hands behind the back for the camel position, Sonia. Is that for the camel position? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really great way to add to it, right? I find that I do that a lot during the day. I had, some back trouble, and I think that I just like a habit now that I used to, when I used to have my back issues, I want to find my pelvis and extend upward out of it. All right, so we're getting close to time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So thank you everyone thank you for your help in finding the schedule for in-person. I will send out some information on that. If it is unclear, please let me know and I'll help to make it more clear. Look forward to seeing you. We have no class on Monday, Memorial Day. So the next time we will see each other, aside from your groups, right, will be in person, but we will have groups in the next 2 Thursdays. So enjoy your Monday, enjoy your Memorial Day, and we'll see you in person.
Thank you.